what happened to me within a year and a half, from being 11 years old to living a normal life, waking up every day and having security and safety, having food on the table, having childhood dreams and being innocent. And to say innocent is just playing with your toys and doing things what normal 11-year-old children do. Then to my dad dying, and then your world being turned upside down overnight, it becomes like a black and white movie. And seeing my mom drinking heavily and passed out on the floor, and then she meets a new man who's very abusive, and then school to break down, and then find myself in a children's home, a dangerous children's home, and being then introduced to this new world which is not full of joy and happiness anymore as such. It's full of drink and drugs, and it's dangerous. But then running away from a children's home and finding myself homeless at 11, 12 years old. I mean, put that in one sentence, homeless at 12 years old. So for me, I think the most kind of traumatic experience in my life was when my father passed away when I was 11 years old. It was 1991, 1st of April. And I think that for me was my first introduction to pain and trauma and feeling like empty. I think that's the only way I could delineate that and articulate it in a way that you can understand that why, when you're in that much agony and pain, it's infinite. It feels like it's never going to go away. And you can't pinpoint it. I think that's the thing as well. If you have a headache, you take a tablet. If you have some kind of toothache, muscle pain, you can pinpoint it. You can find a quick solution for it. And I think pain, when it comes through trauma, is different. There's no quick solution. And I searched for many years as a young boy going into my teenage years for that paracetamol, for that pain relief, and I couldn't find it. Couldn't find it in what was available at that time, which was very, very limited support. And I gravitated towards other boys who were slightly fragmented like me. And I remember having those conversations about feeling empty, feeling like nothing in the world existed anymore. I think when you lose someone at 11, I didn't know what death was. And there was no one really to explain that to me because, you know, I think as a child, you still live in that imaginary world where nothing is guaranteed, nothing is real. And I just remember coming home from school and seeing the car there, thinking that, well, if the car's there, then surely he's going to come back. I thought he'd gone away for a short period of time, but he will be coming back. And I believed that at 11. I believed that that's what death was. It's not permanent because clothes are still in the wardrobe. You empty the house and there's still that kind of that potent smell of your father, you know, aftershave. You see the shoes under the table. I remember a cup which he used, and just having like coffee stains inside, and me kind of thinking, well, that was my dad's cup of coffee, and them stains are the last memory of my dad drinking that coffee. So seeing stuff like that, for me, I just, in my head, just wanted to believe, but that it wasn't forever, that he was going to come back. Going into a children's home at 11 is something else, because it's, you know, you are totally separated from your life as you know it then. It's just something unimaginable. Having a family one day and having a normal life and being in a children's home where you're surrounded by social workers and you're not a human being as such anymore. You're more a statistic. You're more just a part of the system, which is unfortunately forgotten about a lot of the time. So it's easy to navigate into them circles because your foundations are absolutely fragmented now. You're in a children's home, you're away from your family. And then also there's an element of freedom in that, because there's no one there to tell you off, there's no one else to stop you. And to articulate that properly, you think about Oliver Twist and Fagin and people, you know, that environment where they're just out in the streets going wild because there is no authority, there's no routine, there's no structure. And that's what that children's home was. So I had access to things I should never even have been introduced to. Hence the drugs, the drink. But at the same time, that was the new life for me. That was the life which had been created because I'd lost my dad. And I think I took to it like a duck does to water, because it was not anything I needed to hesitate about. I had two options. The option was go home, see mum crying and in pain. She'd met somebody else at this time as well who was nothing like my dad. He was very violent. He was a horrible manipulative man, and that I just didn't want to do that. That for me was more dangerous than being out on the streets with these boys doing drugs and drinking. So the other boys who I'd gravitated towards, who I didn't know existed at the time, because my family kept me very protected from this life. But when my dad died, then it's like they come through the cracks, and you gravitate towards each other because pain finds pain, trauma finds trauma. And it was a young boy from my area who had brought a kind of air freshener, and he put a cloth on it, and he showed me how to do it. And I remember just having that kind of euphoric feeling, out of body experience of just having like total freedom from any thoughts and feelings. You go to a different place, and it's a place again of unconsciousness where there is no reality. And I think that's the addictive part, is that in that small space of time when you're doing stuff like that, the world doesn't exist, or the world you want to believe doesn't exist. It's just so accessible as well. It's the go-to, because you know that other pathway, which is support, counselling, CAMS, things like that. There's steps to that, and it's again to recover, you've got to go over the trauma. This other pathway didn't have to go over anything, just escape it completely. And from drink, it became drugs like marijuana. Same group of people who I'd gravitate towards, introducing me to smoking. And then it went quickly onto things like, at the time when I was young, it was LSD, microdots, just all there as a quick solution to the world. And it became my world. That became kind of my thing at the time. And I got really caught up in that. So being in a children's home and been introduced to a new world, boys who were just very similar to me. The children's home was very dangerous at the time, and some of the older boys who I was kind of mixing with at the time as well said, "Look, you need to get out of that." And that was the paradox of a children's home. It was that supposed to keep me safe, yet I was surrounded by danger. Found out later on in life that this place was run by prolific paedophiles, and again, I was one of the lucky ones. I managed to escape without ever having to endure what a lot of my friends had to go through. And that caused me a lot of problems as well. But running away from the children's home, then I found myself homeless, which is, imagine saying that now, 11, 12 years old, you're homeless. You would think it would never happen, but it did. Because the local authorities just didn't want to come looking for me. There was this dichotomy between us and them. We weren't classed as first-class citizens, more like second-class citizens, and the narrative around all that at the time. But we were a waste of space, a waste of time, a waste of energy. Why would we send our police looking for you when you're going to end up dead anyway? And that was the narrative at the time. But then I found myself in a more precarious situation, because I say this, but vulnerability becomes valuable. And just to kind of to broaden that up a little bit, to when you're young and on the streets, older gang boys who were involved in drugs and more heavily drinking and doing things like that, you become an accessory to them, and you can make money for them. And that's what happened to me. But I found myself in these situations where you're going back to these flats. We would probably call them crack dens and things like that. They've got that name to them, where the drugs are heavier. There's cocaine, there's vodka, there's all these different spirits. But at the time in Yorkshire and Halifax, it was heroin had become quite popular. And I remember one of the older boys who took me under his wing. he asked if I wanted to take some heroin one night, and I said yeah, because I just wanted to make him happy. There was that mutual respect. I looked at him like an older brother. I didn't want to let him down. And he'd taken me upstairs to one of the bedrooms and got the heroin ready. He was burning the spoon, getting the liquid ready, put the liquid into the injection. He put the rubber band around my arm to get the vein, and he was about to inject me with this heroin. And at the time, police had kicked the door down and everybody ran away. They dispersed. And I remember just running off and having nowhere to go. So I went back to my grandma's house. The police came and I thought, oh, here we go, I'm going to get arrested. But that wasn't the case. He brought a piece of paper where they tested the potency of the injection they'd found in the house. And he said, but the percentage of that heroin which was about to be injected into my arm would have killed me imminently. And that was a wake-up call for me. I think when he gave me that piece of paper and I looked at it, it was real. I was 12 at the time, just able to grieve, able to cry. I had a breakdown. I remember hugging my grandparents and just saying, look, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to be a boy again. I want to be a child again. I need help. And that was a turning point for me. In the space of just over 1 year, you've gone from being a little boy playing soldiers in the park, playing with your toys, to your father passing away, to your mom meeting a man who's really abusive, to going into a children's home, to being introduced to a new world full of drink and drugs, to being homeless, to be injected with heroin. That was that moment. You know, everyone has a moment, don't they? I think they call it that. It's a pinnacle point in life where it's, you go that way and you carry on down that trajectory and you end up dead, or you take this as a big lesson in life and you do something with it. You turn it into you turn that adversity into an advantage. And that was that moment. She made a call. It was I think it was a spontaneous call. She must have been sat at home thinking, what are we going to do here? How are we going to help him? She got on the phone and put the boxing coach on the phone, and he said, be here at 6 p.m. tomorrow. And if you're not, you're not. If you are, you are. And I turned up, and then I was there for the next bloody 7 years of my life. All the boys in the gym were exactly like me. They'd come from the same background, and then so I was going into a world which was similar, but still not filled with drugs and drink. But there was another way to kind of exert that energy, and I think that's again, it's serendipity, because it could have, luckily the boxing coach was a friend of my dad's. Luckily, the boxing coach was a family friend. Luckily, he'd heard things about me and he wanted to support me. So it's all aligned. So turning professional as a boxing was amazing, because all that negative things, what had happened in the past, it justified it all. It led to this time of turning professional, becoming a local hero, which was great. Even when I was out jogging on the street, the local butcher would bring out a bag of meat. And say, hey, Chris, your dad would be proud of you. And that was really uplifting for me. I thought it was a stepping stone in the right direction. And everywhere I went, everybody knew me. I was in a local paper. It was a great feeling to have a little bit of local fame in that respect. And then going up to Scotland to fight Stevie Kane, my first professional boxing match in Glasgow in his hometown. I got badly beat up in that fight, and after the fight, the managers were disappointed. Having all that kind of praise, and then all of a sudden it was negative again. It was like, oh, you've got to do better next time. But I came back to Halifax, and it was a massive low for me to have all that praise and doing so well, but then to lose a fight, then come back to Halifax, and then just fall into deep depression. It did that to me, losing that fight. I think I shouldn't have turned professional. Didn't really want to do it, and not winning my first fight was horrible for me. But it took me back down to a place I thought I'd escaped completely. I became really depressed. Stopped training. Stopped getting up in the morning. Stopped looking after myself. And I think again, what we spoke about earlier is about the identity started to disappear again and started to become distant from it. Going back down from Scotland back to Halifax in the car, it was silent. I didn't want to talk. just wanted to run away and hide under a rock, and didn't get up for training the next day, stopped training, stopped taking the calls. And then I kind of gravitated towards what I thought was kind of my escapism, like it was when I was a child, to go back into what I knew. I mean, again, just trying to work out what was available. Didn't want to go back in the gym. Didn't want to show my face on the streets because I felt like I was a loser. Didn't want to have to explain to people what happened in the fight because everyone had high hopes. So I just gravitated towards my old mates again, who were quick to welcome me with open arms, because that's what people do, like hyenas. They want to see you fail. It makes them feel better. And I remember going into a pub and just drinking one day, and one of the boys said to me, "Come into the toilet, I'll give you something, it'll make you feel better." And I've been here before. It's kind of a common ground to me about, trying to make me feel better. So I welcomed it, and I went into the toilet, and he gave me a little white line. And I remember just sniffing the white line in a banknote, and that was it. I was hooked from that one line. Back at square one, in a bedsit. Couldn't afford to pay it because I was on the dole, universal credit as they call it. So I used to tick it because these boys, they knew me, they thought I was good for the money, but then I couldn't pay it back. So the debt just escalated, and I found myself in so much debt it was impossible to pay it back. But I still wanted the drug, so I would do anything to get the drug. I'd borrow money of friends and family. Soon friends and families turned their back on me because I couldn't pay it back. And I was in a horrible bedsit with a tiny single bed with damp everywhere, and I'd hit rock bottom again. One night I put a rope around my neck, and I remember getting onto a stool and counting down to jump. And then when I was going to do that, I remembered a story what my mom told me about my dad working in a slaughterhouse for cash in hand. It was winter, and the only job he could secure to feed his family. And we were the same age at this time. And I'm on a stool about to take my own life, and this great man, this hero, was getting on a pedal moped in snow to go and do a day shift in a slaughterhouse to make sure that me and my sister had food on the table. And that moment made me take the rope off my neck and again have a breakdown, just cry and try and comprehend everything what was happening and try and make sense of it all. And it was just a really dark time. It's hard to articulate because you're unwell. You are unwell. Your brain isn't functioning properly. And my sister had come round to bring me some food the next day. I didn't tell her about what I was going to do, but I think she knew because she saw how low I was and how bad my life had become, and she brought her husband with her. Me and him didn't get on. We didn't see eye to eye because I was a nuisance to him, because I'd borrowed money off him, I'd borrowed money off my sister, I couldn't pay it back. I was a burden to them, and I think he wanted rid of me completely. And I just said, what do I do? How do I make things better? I'm stuck in this world, in this life, which is nothing for me now. I'm a failure, I'm nobody. And he just looked at me quite disappointed and said, why don't you leave? It's as simple as that, just go. And I did. It's the first time I've ever listened to him, but it made sense. It's the first time but anything made sense. And I had a bit of money, about £13, what my sister had given me, bless her. And I went and got a National Express to London. I escaped and walked away, and it changed my life. My brother-in-law, although we don't get on still, I thank him for saying that at that moment in time, saying, leave. And I left. And I left just on time to meet Simon, who introduced me to Mike, who introduced me to the creative arts. He would sit down and he would give me homework with this guy. He would say to me, I want you to read a chapter of Hemingway and then come back and tell me about him. And I would read Hemingway or Joyce and some great writers, and then find solutions in this, like make parallels to their work, and then realize that these men were very similar to me, that there were men who had experienced great pain, there were men who had experienced trauma, there were men who had experienced addiction, and then they could create work like this. I thought, well, that's amazing. We got married rather quickly, me and Andrula, my wife. We bought a house, we had a baby, But again, a positive role model. I found great strength in Andrula. She was a mentor for me, an advocate in that respect, because she said things to me which she lifted me up. She took all that negativity and made it in a positive thing. So, but I also had this fear about everyone you love dies, and I'd already experienced that pain with my dad. So my first form of defense, which is to make people hate you and put people off you. And I think the way I did that with Andrula was to say, tell her the truth, because the truth was so damaging, the truth was so horrible. Any normal person would walk away thinking, oh my God, this guy's got too much baggage, I can't handle this, there's too much stress involved. And there was, but I remember just going, blah, 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 and saying, right, look, I've done a lot of drugs, I've done this, I've made mistakes. And she didn't walk away. I thought, God, what's wrong with this girl? And she made this gesture, putting like, she did this little mime and went like that. And I said, what does that mean? I don't get what that means, what you're doing. And she said, a bad workman blames his tools for doing a bad job. Your tools is your past. And I was like, what do you mean? I don't get where you're going with this. And she went, well, you need to go back into the system and help with people like you. Boom, and that was it. That was a powerful moment. These kids were just neglected. They were left to their own devices. You know, people were going missing. They weren't getting reported. Nobody was getting these kids up to go to school every day. No one was sitting down with these kids on an evening to do their homework, to talk to them. They was just left. They were fighting. The place was a mess. And it's like, this is not natural. It's not normal. And that's where my creativity kicked in, because I started to write about it, because I couldn't talk about it. Because if I spoke about it, I could potentially get myself fired, because these people had been in this job for a long time and I was a new person to the game, and coming and telling them how to do their job, it wasn't going to go down well. But I started to write about it. I started to make comparisons about my own experience and what I was experiencing in my new career. The first book is Damaged, which is a memoir of my life, and then the second one is The State of It, which is more about the political part of the care system, the backstage, the bureaucracy, and just how dysfunctional the work is. But yeah, the book's changed my life completely, because it gave, I'd gone from there to there, where I was doing TV interviews, radio interviews, traveling the country, speaking at conferences. But most importantly, what it did was it resonated a chord with a lot of young people, where I'd get emails and text messages at 2:00 in the morning from young people saying, Chris, I read your book and my life's similar to yours, and I was thinking about killing myself, but now I'm not going to kill myself. I'm going to get support. I'm going to get therapy. And the gratification of the book, the objective was for that. It wasn't for any other purpose, but to help people like me. I was able to change policy and work with decision makers. I got involved in independent care review with Josh McAllister, and that was quite a powerful position to be in, because it enabled me to sit at the table with the right people, politicians, and say, we've got a problem here. We're going to lose a generation of young people to drugs and alcohol, to crime, because the system's not fit for purpose. But we've got young people who, like me, who will fall off the radar. They'll go missing. But these young people need the support. They need to be prioritized. Again, using myself as a perfect example, when my boxing coach believed in me, and it's Mike believed in me in acting, and my wife believed in me, and it changed my life. So that's proof it works. So that's been the catalyst of the work as well, using my own personal experience as an example of what is possible when you put a safety net around vulnerable people. They can create great things. And it's just come from strength to strength. And I'm lucky today to be working across the NHS for Mind, the charity Mind, and building programs to prevent people from, becoming a statistic. Becoming one of those statistics where 28% of everyone homeless has come through the care system, where 55% of everybody who's come through custody has been in care. There were so many times where it could have ended, even with the heroin, being injected with heroin that day. There wouldn't be this day. The police officer come into the house with a piece of paper. He didn't have to do that. He didn't have to come with that paper and help me. What was his purpose to help me? He didn't have to come out of his office and give me that paper. He could have just let me go by my day, but he did turn up. So everything's led to this moment, and I would say I'm quite lucky, but that luck comes with a price, and that price is that you've got to continue the good work. You can't be a hypocrite and walk away from it, and I haven't. I'm 100% dedicated to it, and we're doing some great work.